You know, I make these things up after a while. Because it's always, if it's a new crowd, then I just kind of make it up as I go along. But I thought the shirt would help. Anyway, you know, it's like every kid, you know, if you're interested in comics or adventure stories, you kind of draw this stuff, or you become involved in it in some way as a kid. You read the comics. I mean, I was a big comic strip fan. I didn't buy comics except for the occasional Disney comic. I had a couple of cousins that were, whose parents bought them comics, stacks and stacks and stacks, in the days of the big little books and that kind of thing. And so usually when I visited them, one of which I lived right near my middle school, aka junior high school, and so I would go over to his house for lunch and we'd look at comics. And my favorite was always Superman. I mean, I still think, I mean, once you got Superman, you don't really need anybody else. That was always my opinion. Batman, I wasn't a big Batman fan. But my particular aim was to draw a comic strip, to syndicate a strip. And I think I turned out one when I was about 12 years old. It was a baseball strip. I can't remember what it was called, but I probably did 10 days worth and colored it with crayon, that kind of thing. And I could probably sell it today. So I then make a big jump, and I go to high school and graduate, and then I go to art school, School of Visual Arts in New York. Anybody from New York? Brooklyn, Canarsie. Two of my kids live in New York with their families in Park Slope, near Prospect Park. It's really nice in Brooklyn, you know? Brooklyn became my enemy, though. I mean, not Brooklyn themselves, but it became, not actually, enemy is the wrong word. It just became a very sensitive place to visit after the Dodgers left in 1955. It's like, I wasn't even living in Brooklyn. I never lived in the city at a young age, but when they came to LA, people nowadays can't imagine how it felt to have what was in those days, before all the hype, a hometown team actually, where the players lived in the neighborhood to leave. It was my first indication in life that life was not what I thought it was. It was really crushing. And I gave up after that, to this day. But after visual arts, we had the draft on in those days. And so after serving 4 years in the Air Force, my final year was in Vietnam during that thing. And I came back, and by that time I had a friend, John Verporten, who was production chief at Marvel Comics. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I mean, there were no samples. The only samples I had were from art school, things I had done back then. So he said, bring up, whatever you got, bring it up. And Saul Brodsky, who was looking at the new talents coming in, he gave me inking work right away. So that was basically it. I worked for about 6 months doing inking on the Western stuff. I can't remember who was the guy. Well, of course, Larry Lieber was doing Western stuff. Dick Ayers was doing Western stuff, and I think the Ayers. I can't remember the guy. I really thinking Kid Cole at the time, and I think I wound up penciling one. Yes. Yeah. That's absolutely right. Yeah, but there was another guy. He always did his drawings in blue pencil. Because blue pencils are non-photographic, so he didn't have to erase the pages when he was done. I'll remember it sooner or later. But I aimed for another 6 months, took stuff home, worked on it, and then I was offered a job on staff in the production department because they, in those days when cut and paste was actually cut and paste. A lot of people cut and paste on a computer, they don't know what it really meant. When the pages were set up by hand with rubber cement and galleys, printed galleys from the printer. then instead of sending out the copy to be printed and then have it come back so that you can cut and paste, they bought a photocopy machine. Now, the photocopy machine is not what we're used to now. It was from here to where you're sitting, it was that long. It had a camera and a board where you mounted the artwork. And it had the whole photographic process was in this one machine. The developer, the fixer, and then you would hand feed it into a dryer. So we were doing all our production printing rather than have the expensive sending it out to a printer. That would have been 1840s. That was way back. That was before the telephone. No, that was probably 68, 1968, maybe around there. I still remember Mr. Anderson. He's the guy that showed this white-haired gentleman that came into this suit and tie from a company called iTech. I don't know, do they still exist? They might, I don't know. But he showed me how to operate the machine. That's the job I was offered. Plus any freelance I could pick up. So I was on a salary. I started out in 1966, actually, when I got out of the service. I could get $135 a week when I went on staff. Now, that was good money. That was very good money. I mean, within a few months, I was making $180 a week. Plus, I was doing freelance, freelance inking still. And one day I was sitting in the production department, and now the bullpen, the last time I was in the bullpen was 10 or 15 years ago, but it was half the size of this room. And when we were there, it was just composed of about 4 or 5 cubicles that were maybe 12 by 12, and maybe 4 people jammed in there. There was only about 12 people on staff when I worked there. It was me, and then it was John Armita, and then Marie Severin oscillated between that place when she was drawing and across the hall when she was coloring. And a guy by the name of Tony Mortellaro, who was a dirty old man, who has since passed, but we had a great time in the bullpen. And then on the other side was Maury Cornwell, who was a letterer, production man, and usually another desk for in case a freelancer came into work, and then the camera behind that. Up front was Stan's office, the production office where the production chief was, John Laporte, my friend, and off to the side, Saul Brodsky was up there somewhere, I don't know, but that's all there was. That was the whole office, and of course the number of freelancers there was a handful of them. I think we were putting out about 17 titles then, and that included reprints. And which, we were second banana to DC. I mean, when I worked there, nobody outside the office or outside the comic book world knew who Spider-Man was, for instance. Spider-Man was not a household name. The Hulk eventually had a show on TV with Lou Ferrigno, and that gained that character some notoriety, and from that point on, we were pretty much, just operating in a vacuum, you might say, except for the fans. The shows, I don't know when the San Diego show started. It was probably 42, 69. Yeah, well, that would be about right. Yeah. So they've probably been at it longer than anybody else. And I was working in the production cubicle one day, and Marie was at that point penciling the Incredible Hulk on Tales to Astonish. It was sharing that title with Submariner, right? This is, we're going to be tested after this. I feel like I'm teaching a history class. So Stan stuck his head in the cubicle one day and he said, "Trimpe, you want to draw the Hulk? You want to take that over? We're going into a full title." And okay. I mean, it was. I figured it was a steady gig, basically. That's it. In those days, like stardom. I mean, that kind of started around the same time, actually, that I came in, when Barry Smith and Jim Steranko kind of turned things upside down a little bit, and there got to be a lot more, I mean, except for Jack Kirby, you know, nobody considered themselves anything other than a commercial artist that was drawing comic books. As it turned out, in the early days, 30s, 40s, people who worked in the commercial field, when the work got slow, they'd frequently go to the comic companies and pick up a script there and do a story, because when they brought it back, unlike a lot of the bigger companies, they got a check right away for the work. So they used comics to kind of fill in the gaps between their regular, real work. So I told Stan, yeah, okay. So basically I drew the Hulk in the office for another 6 months, and then I wound up, I was living in Manhattan at the time, so I wound up working at home. And we used to raise a lot of hell. I mean, there was no question about it. Marie, I still have a bunch of her drawings that she did. She would caricature some event or person if they really did something stupid or something that needed to be pointed out to them in a very, very humorous way. She would do something real quick on an 8.5 by 11 and like stick it up on the wall. Well, I, for some reason, was the butt of most of those drawings. So I wound up with a big stack of them, and I kind of forgot about it. But we moved it, Patricia and I and my wife, we moved at one point, and I found these things in a manila envelope, and I got in touch with Marie before she became ill. And I told her I had these drawings, I'd send them to her. She said, nah, you keep them, just send me some copies. So I still have those, but that's the kind of thing we did. And there was a lot of laughing and joking and things like that. But every time, I mean, Stan would complain. He'd come out of his office and he'd say, Trimpe, could you hold it down a little? It was like it was me. It wasn't just me. There was three other people in there, but for some reason he always like